Hello everybody, welcome back to From Rhythm to Algorithm. We continue on with our derivation. What is a sensor? What is the quality of a sensor? What is sensoriality? So, looking to derive a complete definition, what is a sensor? We have to get our linguistics in the proper order. To get our linguistics in the proper order, we have to get our concepts in the proper order. So overall, that is our end goal. Again, I have senses with an S. My microwave does not have senses with an S. When I click reheat, it says it is a sensor, S-E-N-S-O-R. But why should we spell sensor one way or another? Right? You'll see Piers Morgan's Uncensored TV show, but just another spelling of censorship with a C and censor with an S. We're demonstrating and deriving a spelling based off or as a geometric consequence. And so to do so, we have to get our concepts in the right order, which is this overall conceptual progress of the species, and we are pairing our letters to the appropriate concepts. In other words, words have meaning. We're just demonstrating how language works. And so we continue on with our derivation. Again, we've gone through the physical history of the big conceptual individuals, but really an individual has conceptualization, has realization. That realization is not unique. That realization then gets formalized into language, right? And that the proper way to describe physical systems in totality is called ontology. And so we've gone through the ontological history and progression of physics in addition to the actual scientific derivation, which has some more relevance to emphasize today, but a lot of steps, a lot of poignant steps, a lot of labeling, or not again, not this. All of the labeling is appropriate, but we'll spend some time on certain steps that seem appropriate, but just moving through again some more big chunks of the historical progression paired to linguistics directly. So we get to a direct, complete iteration of what is sensoriality, well defined in historical mathematical ontology. It is not the reduced episode, but we got to be getting close. But again, relevant to history, again, the big conceptualization, is this object moving, right? Is my notebook moving? Albert Einstein comes along, again, the most recent individual conceptualization updating, and says this object has a rest energy. We've clearly proven and demonstrated that energy is movement potential. The individual constituents of this notebook are in motion. So this thing is moving, this thing has momentum. E equals mc squared, mass times c. C is a velocity, is a statement of momentum, mass times velocity. And then this notebook is independent. It can move sufficiently independent of myself. And so this notebook is bonded. All of these independent moving discrete particles with no thing in between them, with a mass gap. That's still $1 million, but who cares? But this thing is bonded. Those independent discrete things that are in motion move as one thing or sufficiently as one thing. And so historically, we have a couple of different presentations of what is energy. Conceptually, Gibbs free energy, kind of in thermodynamics, potential and kinetic energy throughout mechanics, and then E equals mc squared as kind of, again, like the last updating of conceptualization paired to an equation. And then last time we articulated that an equation is an extreme reduction or consolidation of conceptualization. Those have been exhausted historically, but really emphasizing the equations that are present are correct. It's the conceptualization, specifically the pairing of words. Like E equals mc squared is a statement of momentum. Right? Clearly, Albert Einstein in history said that's a statement of energy. It's not. This thing is in motion. This thing is moving. And so that is really the biggest conceptualization. Again, from rhythm to algorithm. To maximize motion, you form a rhythm. And when you try to minimize motion, you produce a vibration. And so good vibes only, it is what it is our linguistic structure that is bounded this entire time. And we're just showing some sort of definiteness of this language that we use to describe physical systems. And so at no point in history has the physical definitions, again, all of these words are naturally defined. The physical definitions, the sections of physics ontology, is the most well defined. And all of this logical differentiation is the same quality of this is proven, this is a theorem, this is how this iterates, this goes over here. The physics proofing is what you can see and appreciate the most readily. But in terms back to our equations, just overall historically, these statements of what this equals that is, again, the consolidation of pairing of the fundamental physical conceptualizations. The biggest one being PV equals nRT, which in reality, pressure and volume related to temperature. And the number of moles are the dynamic limit, or again, whatever the constant is in this one. But those are the big concepts: pressure, volume, and temperature. And so we've gone through E equals mc squared, but that was, again, everyone talks about kind of like the progression of special relativity to general relativity, but really we're emphasizing here the assignment of equation and conceptualization of what's the next equation, right? The stress energy tensor, right? We need 3 words to define a variable, and all we're doing is, all we can do, because linguistics is bounded, it is what it is the most general presentation of logic, is make things more specific, produce a complete definition. And so we've already have our bounding, or our presentation, or our consolidation historically of conceptualization to an equation, a stress, energy, and tension. And so we get to that directly. But then still, again, it's this another assignment of gravity, right? Again, Albert Einstein, again, this conceptualization of, hey, I'm going to, if I ran into Albert Einstein at a bar, right, and he was like, yeah, man, I'm a physicist, I'm gonna go use Billy's math equations. That would just be such a level of like, you keep at it, Albert, like, keep it up, brother. But again, it's just this articulation, truly, of independent realization, right? Learning is an individual process, and saying, hey, I'm going to go use somebody else's mathematics. Then it makes me scratch my head and say, Albert, what do you think math is? And then very clearly, historically and demonstrably by action, it's assigning equation. But all language, all equation, all formalization comes from conceptualization. And so that's such a big step down in terms of just understanding and mathematical maturity. Hey, I'm going to take Riemannian geometry and say that's a gravitational field, when the real conceptualization is, when people say gravity, they mean viscosity, and then this differentiation of force being different is not a thing. All force is bounded, again, by what is called pressure. PV equals nRT, you can't break that. So that's this fundamental error, mismotivation, is to go again from pressure to force in some sort of that is our complete description by going to a derivative. It's we need to generalize, right? Sensorality, in the immediate linguistic empirical demonstration, you say ality to generalize any concept. And so you have to solve things completely in total generality to go to pressure to force is derivative. And so that whole motivation historically just doesn't make any sense. And so meaning to say we have force, and then we say force, equals mass times acceleration was the big conceptualization from Newton. But again, it's a reduction or derivation from, again, the historical development of thermodynamics. And so the logic is this big pairing. This is the biggest thing, is you have to generalize to solve completely. And that's, again, been well without or outside of historical capacity to do. You have to iterate the entire logical structure. But point being is, we have, again, this, what is gravity, but what is this equation of gravity? It's another, again, one of these shopping carts with boat engine, and then there's a small plane propeller also taped on there with some wings, and it also has some buoys on it. And it's just here's the stress energy tensor, and you're like, wow, Bill, let's do less drugs and try again. Right? But again, specifically the conceptualization of what is gravity, people really mean viscosity, resistance to motion, the historical progression from gravity is a force to gravity is a shape. It's just another one of these things. Energy is movement potential, gravity is viscosity. That's kind of where you have to start historically. People at Harvard and all, it's you guys are just that's a hard break, just no. But we have this equation, the conceptualizations, right? Stress, energy, and tension. Energy being movement potential. We'll get to it, but then we have stress, movement potential, and tension. And so that's kind of correct. But then the overall, again, the mathematical maturity of Albert Einstein, or of anybody, again, just on an individual bump into them at the bar level, what do you think math is, Albert? And then it's clearly historically equations, and it's just not. It's still literally thematics, but proof. And then you have context again, of language, where a recurring theme is already well defined as a motif. Then you have motive and motif. So you have all of this logical consistency you can't break, and it's just this immediate demonstration of mathematical maturity being like not even in the same universe as even like in comparison to Newton. And then clearly nobody's been correct. And so that's worth pointing out historically. We get to the stress energy tensor. This should be a pretty long one. But moving through our steps, we again revisit some of our simple equations. So what is frequency to velocity? Again, this thing that has momentum of individual particles moving, what is momentum to frequency? And what is radiation to frequency? But we have another equation for energy, E equals h nu. We went through that last time, but again, what is E equals mc squared to E equals h nu? Right? Again, mass is constant, density is definite. The speed of light, again, that's a specific velocity. So we're relating velocity, and we've gone through the conceptualization that we just said, but it was just saying E equals mc squared equals h nu. H, again, a specific mathematical representation or specific case of the dynamic limit. But frequency to velocity. Is velocity frequent? What is mass to frequency? Our mass, our definite stabilized dynamic of charge, is a dynamic. It is an orbit. It is in motion. It is movement. So movement, all movement is frequent. Fundamental theorem of physics. Mass produces frequency. Function is chronological. So this was kind of directly from the toggling of last episode, right? Your functionality, your operationality, what you do is discrete, is one after the other, is one step after the other. From your first steps as a kid to your last steps as integrating and solving the Riemann's hypothesoids. Like you guys could ever do any of this shit. What is chronologicality to cyclicality? Again, this overall geometric intuition of a cycle being kind of a complete rotation, and then chronology kind of being linear. You read historically up to down, left to right, right to left, but you read in one direction. And then even if you have one direction, the x-axis, left or right, it's still a line, right? The unique difference between 2 points is a line. What is cyclicality to frequency? What is frequency to synchronicity? Sensorality is on the same page. Are we on the same wavelength? We're on the same page. Natural definition, direct iteration. Fundamental theorem of physics directly state sensorality is the stress energy tensor. Natural definition, direct iteration. Stress is emphasis. What is size to emphasis? What is basis to emphasis? What is emphasis to stasis? Is stress tense? Tension stresses. Direct iteration. Is energy tense? Is movement potential tense? What is tension to potential? Is tension potent? Is potential tense? Fundamental theorem of mathematics, sensorality is tensorality. And the direct historical chronological progression of what is a tensor, a generalization of a vector, a magnitude, and a direction. But look at it. It's a direct iteration of sensorality. You take the sense, that second T, or the second S, iterate it one element. Right? Like loving is moving, the consolidation of the English alphabet that is well independent of me and you. But you go from the S to the T, one element, and then you just switch the elemental slot. Sensorality is tensorality, the direct historical conceptualization of mathematics, the generalization of a vector by direct iteration. What is odor to tension? Is odor tense? What is timing to tensing? Direct iteration. What is movement to stress? Is moving stressful? What is movement to tension? Is move tense? Again, is moving stressful? Kind of have the conceptualization of moving your stuff, moving houses, moving apartments, but movement limits stress, right? That's why people exercise, or one of the reasons. But again, overall, we're just developing this whole time just a consistent question that's definitively answerable. And this is all the things that are provable along the way. Nice. Fundamental theorem of emotion, tension is stressful. But again, we've kind of asked this question, or again, arrived at this other question, right? Movement, what's the difference between movement and motion? Well, there's motion and there's emotion, but there's no e-movement. Worth pointing out. Again, empirical evidence, because when we go from emotion to motion, that's that physical derivation with linguistic consistency. Again, direct sequential steps. Fundamental theorem of emotion, tension is stressful. Then fundamental theorem of motion, tensing stresses. What is stress to pressure? Sensorality pressurizes stress. Direct iteration. So again, this is where we get gravity is viscosity, and the stress energy tensor, gravity is viscosity. How does viscosity relate to pressure? How does viscosity relate to temperature? How does viscosity relate to volume? Directly PV equals nRT, Albert Einstein land, which is really Riemannian hypothesoids geometry stuffed over here on a golf cart of an equation. But what is stress to pressure? Sensorality pressurizes stress. Direct iteration, sensorality stresses pressure. Direct iteration. A tensor is a centaur. Again, just directly switching the S and the T. Natural definition, direct iteration. A centaur is a center. Right? That phonetic preservation. It's more of, again, like if I said tomato, tomato. Centaur, center. But emphasizing it is that O to the E iteration. Natural definition, direct iteration. Fundamental theorem of logic, sensorality is centaurality. Natural definition, direct iteration, and that's complete, again, from tensorality to centaurality. Now we just add a space. Sensorality is cent-orality. Sensorality is scent-ality, orality. Just trivially generalizing scent, because again, this irreducibility of elementality, the syllable being the fundamental unit of a word, we're showing this direct iteration through complete conceptualization. That's how we get to what is sensorality as we progress the linguistics past that entire conceptualization. Sensorality is sentiality. Centality, sensuality. Again, just like specialty, just that LTY form. What is sensuality? Sensuality. That's the pronunciation. What is sensuality to specialty? Sensorality's specialty is sensuality. Natural definition, direct iteration. Again, that LTY form, for whatever reason, I remember it being like one of the last kind of like word forms. And we're definitely making a direct linguistic conceptual progress and differentiation from speciality. What is territoriality to torrentiality? What is odor to territory? Sensorality is odorating. Sensorality odorates. Direct iteration, sensorality odorizes. What is odorization to pressurization? Sensorality is magnitude and direction. Again, just directly taking the historical development of conceptualization to linguistics. Right? What is a vector? Well, what is a tensor? A generalization of a vector. What is a vector? Magnitude and direction. Those are our operative words. Directly assign it to our variable. What is sensorality? Magnitude and direction. Natural definition, direct iteration. Magnitude is quantity. Sensorality is the quality of direction. Natural definition, direct iteration. Again, separating, specifying this dichotomy, quality and quantity. What is amplification to magnification? Sensorality magnifies indignation. What is denigration to indignation? Fundamental theorem of emotion, sensorality is indignality. Natural definition, direct iteration. What is ignorality to indignality? Sensorality ignores indignation. What is indignation to imagination? Again, this indignation is still this like serendipity, PTD. That syllability is hard to like articulate. What is indignation to integration? Sensorality is indignification. Natural definition, direct iteration. Sensorality is indignificality. Sensorality indignifies. Sensorality is dignity. Sensorality is dignitality. Natural definition, direct iteration. Is a diplomat a dignitary? Sensorality is a dignitary. Natural definition, direct iteration. What is symmetry to centralization? Is civilization symmetric? Are metrics symmetric? Direct iteration. So this had the same type of thought or conceptualization. Is saying the universe is asymmetric the same as saying the universe has no center? Right? Emphasizing historically, you go into physics class, they definitely say the universe has no center in a way where it's, again, you can't realize things that aren't true. You can't learn wrong things in any meaningful historical sense. Right? And so that is phrasing that was definitely picked up. The universe has no center. Is that the same thing as saying asymmetry exists? There is no symmetry. And that's, again, another huge fundamentally wrong thing in the progress of logical representation of physics, ontology, is there's this symmetry over here. No, there's not. It is what it is. That thing's different than that thing every time. Oh, well, we're just going to make this assumption. No. Well, then we can make good progress, and then we see the historical progress of dark energy and dark matter, and you got it wrong. Right? Yeah, wrong. What is geodesicality to symmetricality? Right? Are geodesics symmetric? No, they can't be. Right? Yeah, I just wrote the same thing. Fundamental theorem of geometry, a line is a path. Again, a vector, a tensor is to a vector what a geodesic is to a line. But they're all asymmetric. There is no complete closure. There is no... We're going to get to the C word again, continuity, here in a second. But again, everything is unique. Uniqueness is infinite. Differentiation is endless. Everything is special. But fundamental theorem of geometry, a line is a path. Emphasizing, again, path integral. The left path or the right path. Have you gone down the right path? Are you walking a straight line? This word path, and then obviously iterates to math. Emphasizing that. Natural definition, direct iteration. What is awareness to perspective? Sensorality is accessibility. Natural definition, direct iteration. What is syllability to accessibility? What is accessibility to permissibility? What is permissibility to possibility? What is permission to censorship? Permission, emission. Sensorality is emissionality. Natural definition, direct iteration. Sensorality is emissary. Sensorality is emissariality. Natural definition, direct iteration. What is an emissary to a diplomat? Ejection is emission. Natural definition. What is ejection to projection? Again, still the most comprehensive. Why do I sound Canadian whenever I say productivity or projection? that's getting close to, again, there's a big chunk of France looking land there, but Canada in and of itself is another one of those out and about, productive. But naturally, again, the phonetic, I always seem to do that, productive. But again, emphasizing the most comprehensive, articulated conceptualization of science and total ontology is projection articulated by Freud. But emphasizing the linguistic progress. Again, that's why you have Freudian slips. It's like this elementality. I guess Freudian slips is more to, again, not die, reproduce, and think, and everyone just blurts out sex language all of the time. But emphasizing projection to progression, which I just did, was an elementality iteration. And then the step is emphasizing our base E, natural log E, 2.7 and change for the numeric value, but this fundamental relationship for R2, E for R3, pi for R1, the Fibonacci sequence. What is ejection to projection? Projection. And then it's like pro or and then it's like back to Russian where it's like хорошо or хорошо. It's like, huh. It's just an iteration of syllability, sounds associated to meaning. And then this differentiation literally of resonance and consonance is a thing, obviously. Moving along. What is stress to elasticity? Does stretching stress? Does stressing strain? One of those things, you go lift weights, it's like stretching seems to make sense, and to some extent it does, but then you stretch too much and it definitely depletes your strength. So does stretching stress? Does stressing strain? What is strain to pain? Sensorality appreciates decadentiality. Generalization of decadence, direct iteration. What is pace to cadence? What is cadence to tempo? What is tempo to pace? Sensorality is speciability. Natural definition, direct iteration. Censorshipality is speciability. Natural definition, direct iteration. Again, just using that ability form directly iterated from speciality, speciability. Censorshipality is sensorality and chip. So now we have this another containment of poignancy. Censorship, again with the C, that contains the syllability of censor with an S, and the leftover complete syllability is the word chip. Censorship, but censorshipality, in our complete logical, we need all of our syllables, contains sensorality in chip uniquely. Is a chip a sensor? What do you think, Jensen Huang, or Lisa Su, or Sam Altman? Is a chip a sensor? Where's my $100 million contract? Oh, well, here's a lawsuit, liability worth more than all of your market capitalization, and I'm going to teach you guys how to create real value. You go to jail, I take your entire companies, because again, the liability you have is so profoundly outside of any value you could create. That's fun, that I just get everything, and it's just Brad's big monopoly. Brad wins monopoly. Brad wins the industry. But seriously, there is a lien on all American industry, and there's a lien on all academia. You guys are just directly committing such profound crimes, and all I asked for was like 40 grand a year. That stinks. Is a chip a sensor? Sensorality is chipability. Natural definition, direct iteration. What are chips to sensors? Sensorality is a chip. Natural definition, direct iteration. Like a memory chip, a wood chip, a transmitter chip, or one of the classics, sensorality is a chip off the old block. Natural definition, direct iteration. Now, old block, that again looks like OD from sensotorality, and then block, again, D and B, P and Q are all just like the same thing. OB, OD. It's like an OG from O block, but it's old block, and it's the chip off the old block, and that's sensorality. Chips are thin. Sensorality is odd, emphasizing again now, OD with one more D. Nice, we just keep adding the Ds. Just ask your girlfriend. I wouldn't know, I don't get any girls. Not funny, I don't get to have a career and a family. That's awesome. Sensorality is old, emphasizing again, it's that syllability, OD, iterated by an L, not the word old. The syllability, the shapes associated to sound with no meaning. Natural definition, direct iteration. What is a chip to a ship? Sensorality ships chips. Sensorality is a chip ship. Natural definition, direct iteration. And the other classic sensorality is a nip slip, direct iteration. But clearly, again, we have this fundamental conceptualization, again, through history and philosophy, right? A chip off the old block. How many pieces of a ship can I take off and it still be a ship? When really you're assessing functionality and the ability to identify yourself. Hey, I'm Brad, right? And then you have all of this language that's inherently personified because individuals are articulating words. And so another one, again, all of philosophy is not like a thing. But this fundamental linguistic representation and iteration of C and S. Sensorality with a C, sensorality with an S, chip, ship. What is stress to viscosity? What is stress to velocity? What is velocity to frequency? Rapid is frequent. Fundamental theorem of velocity. And last time we had the of a snail's pace. That was a fun step. But rapid is frequent. And that should strike you very... If something's happening frequent, again, if something's accelerating, you're talking about rapid movement. If something's happened frequently, a slow frequency is a frequency, but when you say frequent, you mean rapid. Rapid is frequent. What is frequency to fluency? Direct iteration. Sensorality is frugality. Natural definition, direct iteration. Is rural frugal? That should be a fun one for all of the non-native English speakers, or even the native English speakers. Again, a lot of these, again, because that's what fundamental physical differentiation is separating vibration, resonance with consonance. And so that, again, serendipity, the DPT consonants is always hard to articulate, especially in sequential order. Is rural frugal? Sensorality is longevity. Sensorality is longevitality. Natural definition, direct iteration. What is longevity to levity? What is longevity to inevitability? What is longevity to propensity? Sensorality is propensity density. Natural definition, direct iteration. So, restating the fundamental theorem I have of logic / mathematics, we'll explain why. A step is a segment. So, right, we went from a set, iterated that by one letter, to a step, changed the elementality order. I still call that just an iteration. But a step is a segment, and that's our fundamental from rhythm, a minimization of steps. And then again, that implicit set, because everything is contained, because we have independent, discrete things. But a step is a segment, emphasizing that segment here, the geometric progression of P from step goes to the G of segment. The other letters are obvious, but this was kind of, again, if you take a circle, and then you take an end polygon inscribed in the circle, and then you take the line segments, right, set to segment directly geometrically, and then you take that to infinity, right? You're literally bounded by the atoms, right? If you draw something on the board, that thing has, right, it's a physical thing. It has particles and atoms. And so, like if you took the line segment, just the mathematical representation, and you take that to infinity, right, you approach the circumference of the circle. So that's the direct intuition geometrically, physically here. But a step is a segment, and then if you have this infinite line segment and polygon, is just what I've called it. Again, we've gone through this geometric, it's the same geometric arguments. We've already gone through the whole analytical structure. But that's the direct intuition here from going from the assignment of the word step. A step is a segment, explicitly thinking all of the line segments. If you took an end polygon inscribed in a circle, took it to infinity. Sensorality is polygonality. Natural definition, direct iteration. And again, that area between, or the volume between the actual physical bounding of a circle to the discrete things, that is, again, the geometric articulation of infinitesimality. If you try to take something as small as it can be, there is a physical limit. We'll get here in a second, but which again is correctly called the infinitesimal, but nobody's articulated it's a physical bound. And you kind of just say, hey, this is the smallest anything can be, and it just so happens there is a smallest anything can be, and so it works out. But certainly it has never been articulated that the infinitesimal is physically bounded at any point in mathematical history. But A step is a segment. And then again, you get the term, right? The fundamental difference between 2 points. Again, what's the most fundamental geometric object? A point. Well, then you have 2 points. Then you have the fundamental difference, a line. Then you have a line segment. Again, the linguistic logical progression as well. So sensorality is a line segment, but sensorality is polygonality, that whole structure of a polygon. Are polygons diagonal? Sensorality is the diagonal of a polygon. Natural definition, direct iteration, again, that's the fundamental geometric argumentation or representation of why atoms can vibrate. If you take a pentagon, just for example, that's one we use at the very beginning because we're cycling our logic. It's the same, right, the same steps again. But if you take from one vertex, the top of the pentagon, to the center of the pentagon, again, geometric object, that line segment is longer than from the center to the opposing side because it isn't symmetric. And that asymmetry geometrically is, again, physical reality exists, and that is the representation where you can say this is why atoms can vibrate, is this discrepancy. So when they have force, centripetal force, it pushes more to this way, and then it rotates, pushes, and it just vibrates. A limitation of motion. But what is discreteness to smoothness? What is summation to integration? That step of going, hey, right, is a circle continuous? Can you really have a perimeter? Again, is anything continuous? Right? No. So you have discrete mass gaps that are just bonded. My notebook is one thing, it moves sufficiently independent of me, but these are independent things that are orbiting one another in a stabilized dynamic. That centralized locality is, again, E equals mc squared, a statement of momentum. This is mass times velocity. But historically, again, this physical discreteness is why you go from a summation to integration, right? But it's just, again, this step of what is an infinitesimal is this, you have, again, the Planck length, is this fundamental, there's finite discreteness, but when you say the electron is a point particle, it's definitely wrong, 100% wrong, that needs to change completely. Because for the double slit experiment, that's what's happening. Is there's just internal dynamic to the doubles or to the electron itself, and then when you quote unquote don't interact with it, don't measure it, you don't perturb its momentum, right? It's like saying, why can I hear a song when nobody's screaming? And then you start screaming, the analogy being interacting with something, you destroy the resonance pattern directly, literally. And so that's like in that there's like no intuition to me for like what is the double slit experiment. It's just like you guys are, the electron is not a point particle. But mathematically, it's a limit. It's a differentiation limit, again, of like the whole universe. And so we have perception limits, right? I can only see so much of the ultraviolet spectrum, but there's other radiation out there. There's not anything physically smaller than what's articulated correctly as the Planck length, but that doesn't mean the electron is not, it doesn't have internal dynamic. Mathematically, that's why you directly go from summation to integration, and historically it's correctly, but you just go into calculus class and like, yeah, area under the curve, and you're just like, okay? But going from summation to integration, right, then you'll say integration is continuous summation. Kind of like, that's like the logical progression, but everything's discrete. Like that's like a wrong thing. Integration is summation. It's just this infinitesimal is this imperceptible limit. So mathematically correct, physically directly and like problematically wrong. That's why you have this, what is the double slit experiment? But like mathematically saying there's this fundamental unit, this infinitesimal, and we're adding up all of the smallest things. Those are discrete things. They're not continuous. So then you get into math class and it says, you need a continuous function to take a derivative, and you're just like, there's nothing continuous. What is anybody talking about? And so that's what I got there for now, but everything is discrete, independent things, right? Nothing is touching, but everything is connected. Fundamental theorem of linguistics, a sentence is a sequence. A sentence is a summation, right? Literally a summation of syllables. All right, are we integrating, or we're just adding up a bunch of independent discrete syllables, independent units? And again, all of this physical property scales from linguistics, mathematics, physical things. You look at the black hole, you look at an atom, and it looks the same because it is. It looks like a discrete polygon because it is. But fundamental theorem of linguistics, a sentence is a summation. Sensorality is summationality. Natural definition, direct iteration. Sensorality is summarily. And so now here, this is a really interesting historical step, right? Summation, summarily. Like if I was going to summarize something, in summation, summarily. But what was the first people credited with writings? Sumerian. So summarily, as we just naturally produced, then you iterate that consonants directly and you get Sumerian. So then I even try to like Google it, because I don't Google anything, not like I'm trying not to, but it's just, I don't even know what I would try to type in. But again, who's calling who a Sumerian, right? We called this group of people, or this translation, or again, this consolidation of information, and saying, hey, this is the first writing system, or the first people that wrote. And it's like, historically, certainly it's a direct iteration. In order, syllable by syllable, summarily, Sumerian. And so it's like, are Sumerians calling themselves Sumerians? Are they summarizing? That's what they're doing. And so it's again one of these things, like historically you have who is Homer, right? Home is where the heart is. But in the ancient Greeks, you just have a bunch of people learning tradition. So it's like, Homer one person? Is he not one person? Right? Are Sumerians a group of people, or is it people that's summarizing? So we have this language is literal. It is what it is the entire time of history. And so again, relevant to our historical logical progression, the Sumerians are the first person who did what? Summarized? Right? Who is calling who a Sumerian? But that's what's going on there directly. Direct iteration. Sensorality is Sumerian. A summary is a summation. Natural definition is motion summation. Again, then we have a flip book. You're on the bus in 4th grade, and you're like, look at Johnny, look at the skateboarder. And then you go to a movie, and you're at the cinema. Motion picture. Is motion summation, motion picture. Again, reflecting this fundamental physical discreteness of all of the things you're made of and everything around you is made of. And you say thing because it's vibrating, because its motion is limited because of pressure. It's bounded in a locality. And motion is local. That's why you can move around. Can you move? Yes. Everything we've said up to now proven by empirical evidence. Beat ya, science, all of science. Appreciation is ordinal. Summarian is ordinary. Sensorality is an ordinary sum. Sentencing is sequencing. Natural definition, direct iteration. Sentencing sequences syllables. Direct iteration. What is tense to syllability? In the direct linguistic context, I need to conjugate my verb. I need to present the conjugation. That's okay. That establishes a subject, that preserves consistency between subject and verb. We also have consistency of plurality and singularity, which we clearly see in English with the S. But what is tense to syllability? Right? Why are most frequent verbs irregular? Conjugation preserves syllability. What is syllability to elementality? Again, conjugation preserving this discreteness, this consistency, right? There is no continuity. You have consistency, no continuity. What is syllability to elementality? Is linguistics musical? Is music linguistic? Is a bond a charge? So back to the fundamental physics at their end there. Again, we're not at the final reduction. But again, what is charge to bonding? Right? A bond is a shared electron. Okay. Bond, again, we're using bond at this point still more like logically. This thing is just, I push up here on the notebook, this whole thing moves sufficiently independent of me. And then we have our chemistry presentation, covalent, ionic, which is correct, but we're just walking through all of the logical associations to the language. And so, what is a bond to a bound? What is a boundary condition? What is charge bound? Sensorality is the boundary of charge. Regardless, that is, we have up until now, my rights continue to be profoundly and extensively violated. The value is clear and present. The violation of the law is clear and present. I continue to ask for a little bit of money to eat properly, to sleep properly, and to work. Each day goes by, I don't get one more time, my parents don't get what's going on. Solved the whole science multiple times, can somebody treat me like a human being? Still no. Press every charge, I expect nothing to change. That is what I have for now. See you on the next one.